Hello, I'm Brian Young, and we're going to look at 26105, Introduction to the National Electrical Code. Um, this may look a little bit different than my usual videos. I'm actually using a hard copy of the book, and I just want to talk about the book, the National Electrical Code. It's published by the National Fire Protection Association. Um, it is a consensus document, meaning that anyone can submit a change to the National Electrical Code, and it'll go to a board of directors, and they will go over the recommended change. Here's a list of the code making panels and what they cover, who's on the panel, and they will look at the submissions, they'll look at the recommendations, and they will vote yes or no. And if it passes, then it will be included in the next edition of the National Electrical Code. It is updated every 3 years. This edition is the 2023, so the next one that'll come out will be 2026. If you have any recommendations, you can submit them. If it's past the due date for submissions, you can submit it for the 2029 version of the code. But anyone is allowed to put in a recommendation for change to the National Electrical Code. So the first thing we need to be familiar with is the table of contents. This shows us the layout of the code. And I'm probably going to make a lot of mistakes here. I'm going to have to fix them in editing, but let's take a look here. There's chapter 1, general. Notice that Article 90 is before chapter 1. You have the introduction to the code, which is Article 90, and 9 chapters. So Article 90 is the introduction to the code. It comes before chapter 1. Chapter 1 is general requirements for all electrical installations. Chapter 2 is wiring and protection. They talk about 2, 3, and 4 being plan, build, and use, in that the planning stages, everything in chapter 2 is for planning stages. You'll find out wire size, you'll find out the overcurrent protection. So here we have branch circuits not over 1,000 volts, feeders, branch circuit feeders and service load calculations, outside branch circuits, services, branch circuits, feeders, services over 1,000 volts, overcurrent protection. Article 250 is a big one. That's grounding and bonding. That's probably one of the most important articles in the entire code book because the grounding and bonding is what saves lives. And then you get to chapter 3, wiring methods. And I like to say that this is everything you can buy at Home Depot. So from conduit to wire to connectors, we have general requirements, conductors for general wiring, cabinets, cutouts, boxes, meter sockets, outlet device, pull and junction boxes. This is how you size the enclosure. How big does it have to be? Medium voltage conductors, cables, cable joints, armored cable, flat conductor cable, flat cable assemblies, integrated gas spacer cable. So the one that we use for residential is non-metallic sheath cable. So NM, NMB, NMC, Non-metallic sheath cable types NM and NMC, that's what we call Romex. The name brand is Romex, but it's non-metallic sheath cable, Article 334. And you can see that they break these articles up into parts. Part 1 is general, Part 2 is installation, Part 3 is construction specifications. A lot of these will follow that layout. Power and control tray cable. Part 1 is general, Part 2 is installation, Part 3 is construction specifications. Service entrance cable type SE and USE. USE is underground service entrance cable. Part 1 is general, Part 2 is installation, Part 3 is construction specifications. So here's your table of contents. Like I say, it's where you start all of your searches. When you are looking for something specific, you'll start in the table of contents and find where it is. I told you about plan, build, use. Here's chapter 4, equipment for general use. So plan, build, use. This is going to give you transformers, switches, receptacles, fixture wire. There you go. 406 is receptacles, cord connectors. 408 is switches, switchboards, switchgear, panel boards. All of these things are, like I say, the things you will put in after the rough in, the things that go in during the trim out. Generally speaking, I'm not going to swear that that's how they laid out this book, but that's what they try to do. And then chapter 5 is special occupancies, gas stations, hospitals, theaters, things like that. Special equipment, chapter 6, special equipment is manufactured wiring systems, elevators, dumbwaiters, 680 is swimming pools, electric vehicle power transfer systems. That's a kind of a new one. Electrified truck parking space. So truckers stop overnight and they will pull up to one of these electrified truck parking spaces. They don't have to leave their truck running all night like they used to. This will provide them with air conditioning, electricity, lights, internet, Wi-Fi, what have you, and they can stay in their truck all night with that air conditioning, and they don't have to run the engine. So it's better for the environment. Chapter 7 is special conditions. So this is going to get into the different Category 1, Category 2, Category 3, legally required standby systems, optional standby systems, interconnected electric power production sources. Chapter 8 is communications systems, and Chapter 9 is tables and examples, is what they used to call it. Tables and examples. So we're going to start at Article 90. Article 90 is the introduction to the code. Article 90 tells us how the code is arranged, and it gives us a crash course in using this book. They specifically say that this is not a learning manual. It's not a training manual. It is for people, professionals and what have you. That's why you don't buy one of these at Home Depot. It doesn't tell you how to convert your garage into a bedroom. It says 90.1 scope. This article covers the use and application, arrangement, and enforcement of this code. It also covers expression of mandatory, permissive, and non-mandatory text. It provides guidance on the examination of equipment and on the wiring, planning, and specifies the use and expression of measurements. 90.2 use and application, practical safeguarding. We had to memorize this when I was an apprentice. The purpose of the code is the practical safeguarding of persons and property from hazards arising from the use of electricity. And then they go on to say this code is not intended as a design specification or an instruction manual for untrained persons. So they're telling you right there that this is not a manual on how to do it. This isn't the how, it's the why. Adequacy, it tells you that this code contains provisions that are considered necessary for safety. Compliance therewith and proper maintenance results in an installation that is essentially free from hazard, but not necessarily efficient, convenient, or adequate for good service or future expansion of electrical use. They're telling you that this code is a minimum. And when you put in a panel, when you size the panel, you should probably add another 20 to 25% to the panel for future expansion. If you figure a house and the house comes out to 95 amps, I wouldn't put a 100 amp panel. I'd put a 150 amp panel. In fact, I don't think I'd ever put anything less than a 200 amp panel in any new construction, just in case. This goes into installations covered. This code covers the installation and removal of electrical conductors, equipment, and raceways. Let me see if I can get to that other side there. Hold on, sorry. There. Signaling and communications conductors, equipment, and raceways, and optical fiber cables for the following: public and private premises, including buildings, structures, mobile homes, recreational vehicles, and floating buildings. So it covers floating buildings. It does not cover boats, yards, lots, parking lots, carnivals, and industrial substations. Installations of conductors and equipment that connect to the supply of electricity. Installations used by electric utilities such as office buildings, warehouses, garages, machine shops, and recreational buildings that are not an integral part of a generating plant, substation, or control center. So this book does not cover generating plants, electrical generating plants. That's they've got a different code. I think that MSHA covers a lot of that. Installations underground in mines. Oh, this is uses not per, okay, installations not covered. So we said that it covers floating buildings. It does not cover marinas or boats. And what's the difference between a floating building and a boat? A boat has locomotion. You can steer it. You can, it moves under its own power. A floating building has to be moved around on a river or a lake by a tugboat. And you dock it next to the shore, and the ship to shore, the shore power is on land, and then the drop goes to the floating building offshore. Those are covered. So let's see here. What about enforcement? It talks about the authority having jurisdiction, AHJ. You need to know that. 90.4. Oops, excuse me, I'm not low enough here. There we go. Sorry, like I said, this is a little bit awkward. 90.4 enforcement. Application. This code is intended to be suitable for mandatory application by government bodies that exercise legal jurisdiction over electrical installations, including signaling and communications systems, and for use by insurance inspectors. Interpretation, the authority having jurisdiction, there's that phrase, authority having jurisdiction for enforcement of the code has the responsibility for making interpretations of the rules, for deciding on the approval of equipment and materials, and for granting the special permission contemplated in a number of the rules. So that's the authority having jurisdiction. And if we're not sure what an authority having jurisdiction is, we can always go to Article 100, which is definitions. And let's see what they have in definitions about the authority having jurisdiction. Where am I? There we go. There you are. So way down here, bottom of page 27, authority having jurisdiction, the AHJ. Says an organization, office, or individual responsible for enforcing the requirements of a code or standard, or for approving equipment, materials, an installation, or a procedure. And it goes on to tell us in this informational note that the phrase authority having jurisdiction, or its acronym AHJ, is used in the NFPA documents in a broad manner, since jurisdiction and approval agencies vary, as do their responsibilities. Where public safety is primary, the authority having jurisdiction may be a federal, state, local, or another regional department or individual such as the fire chief, fire marshal, a chief of a fire prevention bureau, a labor department, or health department building official. Let me see if I can get that back here. There we go, way up here now. Or building electrical inspector, or others having statutory authority. For insurance purposes, an insurance inspection department, rating bureau, or other insurance company representative may be the authority having jurisdiction. In many circumstances, the property owner or his or her designated agent assumes the role of the authority having jurisdiction. At government installations, the commanding officer or departmental official may be the authority having jurisdiction. So there's a hierarchy that if you're talking about an insurance adjuster, they could be an authority having jurisdiction, but the electrical inspector has authority over the insurance adjuster. The chief electrical inspector has authority over all the other electrical inspectors, and the fire marshal has the ultimate authority over even the chief electrical inspector, believe it or not. So the fire marshal in the jurisdiction has the ultimate say. Basically, that's what this code is. This entire code book is for the prevention of fires. Remember, it's written by the National Fire Protection Association. So it's all about the safeguarding of persons and property from hazards arising from the use of electricity. We don't want anything to burn down. Okay. So going back to Article 90, the introduction of the code, it tells us the structure of the code arrangement, 90.3. Let me turn that. Here it is, code arrangement. Let me see if I can show you that. Well, I wish I had a zoom on this camera. 90.3 code arrangement says this code's divided into the introduction and 9 chapters. We are right now, we're reading the introduction, Article 90. As shown in Figure 90.3, Chapters 1, 2, 3, and 4 apply generally. Chapters 5, 6, and 7 apply to special occupancies, special equipment, or other special conditions. It may supplement or modify the requirements in Chapters 1 through 7. So 1 through 4 apply generally to all installations. 5, 6, and 7 are special. It's special occupancies, special equipment, or special conditions. Chapter 8 covers communication systems and is not subject to the requirements of Chapters 1 through 7, except where the requirements are specifically referenced in Chapter 8. So if Chapter 8 calls out grounding and bonding in Article 250, now Article 250 applies. If Chapter 8 talks about conduit fill, now Chapter 9 Table 1 applies for conduit fill. So this is their diagram here where they're talking about chapters 1 through 4 applies generally to all electrical installations, and 5, 6, and 7 supplement or modify chapters 1 through 7. And chapter 8 is communication systems. Chapter 9 are tables. They're applicable only as referenced. So wherever chapter 9 is referenced anywhere else in the code, then it becomes applicable. Other than that, it's for informational purposes. Informational notes are for information purposes only. Okay, let's take a look here at mandatory rules. Mandatory permissive rules. Mandatory has the word shall or must. Mandatory rules of this code are those that identify actions that are specifically required or prohibited and are characterized by the use of the terms shall or shall not. Permissive rules, they say, well, yeah, okay, you can do this. Permissive rules of this code are those that identify actions that are allowed but are not required, are normally used to describe options or alternative methods, and are characterized by the use of the terms shall be permitted or shall not be required. Explanatory material. Explanatory materials such as references to other standards, references to related actions of this code, or information related to a code rule is indicated in this code in the form of an informational note or an informative annex, unless the standard reference includes a date. The reference is to be considered as the latest edition of the standard. Such notes are informational only and are not enforceable as requirements of this code. So, informational notes. They'll tell you things just like this informational note right above us. They're talking about new products, constructions, or materials. This code may require new products, constructions, or materials that may not yet be available at the time of the code is adopted. In such event, the authority having jurisdiction may permit the use of the products, constructions, or materials that comply with the most recent previous edition of this code adopted by the jurisdiction. And then there's an informational note. This is not an enforceable part of the code, but it's for informational purposes only. It says, see informative Annex H, administration and enforcement for a model of guidelines that can be used to create an electrical inspection and enforcement program and to adopt NFPA 70 National Electrical Code. Okay, so that's informational notes. Examination of equipment. Anytime you have equipment delivered to the job, you need to inspect it to make sure that it's safe, but you don't have to look at the internal wiring. It says for specific items of equipment and materials referenced to in this code, examinations for safety made under standard conditions provide a basis for approval where the record is made generally available through promulgation by organizations properly equipped and qualified for experimental testing, inspections of the run of goods at factories, and service value determinations through examinations by different examiners, frequently with inadequate facilities for such work, and the confusion that would result from conflicting reports on the suitability of devices and materials examined for a given purpose. This is referencing Underwriter's Laboratory. Underwriter's Laboratory is a third-party examining laboratory. They'll take electrical equipment and they will give it rigorous tests. And if it passes their standards, then they list it and label it. If it's listed, it's written in a book. If it's labeled, they take a label and affix it to the device. So listing and labeling. The authority having jurisdiction is saying that you do not have to inspect internal wiring. You don't have the equipment necessary or available to you to do a thorough inspection, and you may not even have the requisite knowledge of how to examine it. So they say you look at the outside, see any damage. If the box that it came in is damaged, you may have to send it back. You may not be able to use it. But if the box is in good shape and the thing that you pull out of the box is in good shape, you can just take it on faith that the internal wiring has already been inspected and approved by some underwriter's laboratory or different third-party establishments, and is acceptable to the authority having jurisdiction. So you don't need to take the cover off and look at the internals. It says, is the intent of this code that factory installed internal wiring of the construction of equipment need not be inspected at the time of installation of the equipment, except to detect alterations or damage. If the equipment has been listed by a qualified electrical testing laboratory that is recognized as having the facilities described in the preceding paragraph, and that requires suitability for installation in accordance with this code. Suitability shall be determined by application of requirements that are compatible with this code. Very good. All right. Units of measure, they're going to put the metric units first. So the measurement system of preference for the purpose of this code, metric units of measurement are in accordance with the modernized metric system known as the International System of Units. Dual system of units, SI units shall appear first, and inch-pound units shall immediately follow in parentheses. Conversion from inch-pound units to SI units shall be based on hard conversion, except as provided in 90.9C. Permitted uses of soft conversion. The cases given in 90.9C1 through 4 shall not be required to use hard conversion and shall be permitted to use soft conversion. So trade sizes, where we call it a half-inch conduit because the internal diameter of the conduit is at least a half an inch in diameter. It's often larger than a half inch. I believe they call that 14 millimeter, and that's a soft conversion. It's not an exact conversion between standard units and metric, or metric and the inch pound. Where the actual measured size of a product is not the same as the nominal size, trade size designator shall be used rather than dimensions. Trade practices shall be followed in all cases. So, extracted material, where material is extracted from another standard, the context of the original material shall not be compromised or violated. Any editing of the extracted text shall be confined to making the style consistent with that of the National Electrical Code. So a lot of times they'll see in brackets, they'll give you information as to where something came from. They'll say this was extracted from another NFPA document or from Underwriter's Laboratory, their white book, or what have you. Okay. I'm not going to read this whole thing to you. I'm just trying to give you some kind of a background on the code book. I'm going to finish this part one by saying the National Fire Protection Association writes books on things that can burn. So they have an encyclopedic volume of books. I don't know exactly how many books are in their series, but I believe it's over 100. It might be over 200. And this book, the National Fire Protection Association 70, this is the 70th book in that encyclopedic volume of books. So this is the 70th book. Like I say, children's clothing, children's toys, upholstery, automobiles, curtains, anything that can burn, they've written a book about it. And electricity can cause fires, so they've written a book about electricity. It's the 70th book in that encyclopedic volume of books. And if you look at the pages of this book, every page, just like every kiss begins with K, every page in this book begins with 70-59, 70-61, 70-63, because it's referencing that this is the 70th book and this is page 65. You can forego the 70 when you're talking about the page number. You can say page 65, page 225, page 263. But every page begins with 70 dash. Again, because this is the 70th book. They also have NFPA 70E, safety-related work practices. That is a standard to try to protect people working from electric shock or electrocution. So that book is kind of an addendum to this. I think it was written in 1970. I can't swear to it, but I think that's when it was first published. The NFPA 70E. It's different than this book, the NFPA 70. Okay. I'm going to stop here and go on to part 2. Again, we're going to talk about the definitions, Article 100. We're going to talk about general requirements for electrical installations, Article 110. And I don't know if they go into detail about Article 310 wire sizes or not. Okay, I'll see you at the next video.